Hi, I'm Marianne Grady Flores, and I'm here to introduce my sister Clare Grady, who gave a talk early this morning up at St. Catherine of Siena Roman Catholic Church on Hanshaw Road in Ithaca. She gave the talk at 10 this morning, and today's date is December 2nd, 2018. And Clare was a part of an action called the Kings Bay Plowshares Action. And so I'm going to read the introduction that we gave this morning. There was a little video technical problem, so we're redoing this now. So the introduction reads, acting to fulfill the Old Testament prophet Isaiah's vision of a world where they will beat their swords into plowshares, 7 Catholic activists committed to an act of nonviolent symbolic disarmament entered the Kings Bay Naval Submarine Base in St. Mary's, Georgia on April 4th, 2018, months ago, on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., who devoted his life to addressing what he called the triplets of evil, of militarism, racism, and extreme materialism. Theirs was the most recent direct action against the imminent threat of nuclear war, inspired by the first Plowshares action the Plowshares action in 1980 at a General Electric missile plant in Pennsylvania. International in scope, the movement has led to over 100 such actions to date. Kings Bay Naval Base opened in 1979 as the Navy's Atlantic Ocean Trident port, Trident meaning the submarines. It is the largest submarine base in the world, the home port to 6 nuclear ballistic missile submarines, each of which is armed with 16 Trident II missiles, each carrying at least 4 bombs that individually have 7 to 25 times the explosive power of the weapon that destroyed the city of Hiroshima in 1945. At least 1,000 nuclear warheads are stored at Kings Bay, making the size of its stockpile one of the largest in the world. The scale of these weapons confirmed the activists' declaration that the ultimate logic of Trident is omnicide, the extinction of all human life by one human act. Further, they proclaim that not only the use of such weapons, but their very existence is both illegal and immoral. For exposing these crimes against peace committed by the United States government, Elizabeth McAlister, 79, who is the widow of Philip Berrigan, she's from Baltimore, Jonah House, Baltimore. Father Steve Kelly, S.J., he's a Jesuit, and he's 69, of the Bay Area in California. Martha Hennessy, 62, she's the granddaughter of Dorothy Day. And then Carmen Trotta, he's 57, just turned 57. He's actually the baby of the crowd. He's from the New York Catholic Worker. Clare Grady, who just turned 60, she's of the Ithaca Catholic Worker. Mark Colville, 57, of the Amistad Catholic Worker in New Haven, Connecticut. And Patrick O'Neill is 61, of the Father Charlie Mulholland Catholic Worker in Garner, North Carolina. They face charges which, if they are convicted, could lead them to serving sentences up to 25 years in federal prison. So here's a few ways to help continue and expand the witness of the Kings Bay Plowshares digit number 7. So first, come to Brunswick, come to Georgia, Brunswick, Georgia, to vigil and witness at in court during the trial of the Kings Bay Plowshares 7, when the date is finally set. And at this moment, we have been told that it's possible that the trial will happen in February. Also, keep current on further news about the actions and the vigils. The other thing is we're inviting people to call on these different defendants in order to invite them to come and speak in your community. We need to get the word out. And there's a couple of other things. One is to organize the showing of the film, The Nuns, the Priests, and the Bomb. There's a great trailer that you can watch that'll give you a sense of what the film is about, the past two Plowshares actions. And then also to promote the Treaty for the Nuclear Abolition by ICANN. It's the International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons. They are winners of the Nobel Peace Prize last year. And their website is www.icanw.org. Thanks very much. And here's Claire.
We just read the names of all 7 of us in the Kings Bay Plowshares. And I just want to remember that Steve Kelly and Liz McAlister have been in jail since April 5th, the night of our action. So Liz is now in her, she likes to say, her 80th year. And the conditions in the county jail are pretty hard. And so I just want to remember those 2 of our dear friends and community. All 7 of us are Catholic, which isn't always the case in the Plowshares action. Most often it is, but we are all Catholic. And it was a new decision to try to present a defense of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So what I'm going to read to you today, just a little bit of, is what I prepared as my contribution to what we did. We're doing pretrial, presenting a Religious Freedom of Restoration Act defense. So we're saying that we have deeply held religious beliefs and that they compel us as we practice them to do this kind of nonviolent symbolic disarmament action. So I'm just going to, that's a context for what I'm reading. Some people say, why are you just talking about the Bible or whatever? That's what this was prepared for, to explain what my religious beliefs are. So I explain this sometimes, but many years ago I was grateful to begin the practice of reading the daily Mass readings. It's sort of like a beautiful foundation that shores up my life. And in the middle, or some way into that, I thought, I wonder what the readings were on the day that I was born, Sunday, November 9th, 1958. And it turns out that it's Mark's Gospel, chapter 12. So that's what I began my affidavit with in this particular talking about my religious beliefs. So the passage from Mark's Gospel, chapter 12, is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is Lord alone. You shall love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." Nuclear weapons eviscerate and violate the possibilities of loving God and neighbor. We cannot build, possess, maintain, and threaten the use of nuclear weapons and love God as if God were Lord alone. Loving God requires trusting God and reverencing the sacredness of all of God's creation. Nuclear weapons have become an idol, replacing love and trust and love of God with the willingness to threaten and destroy all of God's creation in the illusory pursuit of maintaining power and control. This greatest commandment from Mark's Gospel that links love of God with love of neighbor gets more specific in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25. "Whatsoever you do to the least of your neighbors, you do to me, God." Church teaching is clear on the preferential option for the poor. So I'm just going to hold that thought. The statement that we brought with us to Kings Bay on April 4th, 5th of this year says, "Nuclear weapons kill every day by their mere existence. Their production requires mining, refining, testing, and dumping of radioactive material, which poisons sacred earth, water, and land, all on indigenous land. We see the billions of dollars it takes to build and maintain the Trident system as stolen resources, which are desperately needed for human needs. We see nuclear weapons as a cocked gun, the biggest gun used 24/7 to enforce the many layers of state-sponsored violence and deadly force required to maintain white supremacy, global capitalism, and global domination. All of the above is the opposite of love of neighbor and the opposite of loving the least. And it is our loving response to this systemic harm of the least. I see our action as an act of resistance to this harm, an act that seeks to interrupt the systemic violence by withdrawing consent with this act of symbolic disarmament. So the following statement by Pope Francis, delivered on November 10th of last year, said in his Symposium on Disarmament, reflects the understanding that I expressed above. Francis categorically condemns nuclear weapons, not only the threat of their use, but their very possession. His audience included representatives from the United States and Russia. He told them that, quote, international relations cannot be held captive to military force, military mutual intimidation, and the parading of stockpiles of arms. He continued, weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear weapons, create nothing but a false sense of security. They cannot constitute the basis for peaceful coexistence between members of the human family, which must rather be inspired by an ethic of solidarity. End quote. So that reflects the part before, Mother Joe wasn't here, of our relationship to God, neighbor, and the least. And this act of symbolic disarmament interrupts and withdraws our consent from that systemic harm of the least. So the Catholic religion, as I see it, is incarnational. The Word was made flesh. It is part of our practice. We eat the bread, we drink the wine, the body and the blood of Christ. We are called to manifest our love of God and neighbor. And that means we cannot pray for peace and drop bombs at the same time. We cannot pray for peace and pay for the bombs at the same time. And we cannot pray for peace and let others drop bombs in our name. So believing and knowing all this leaves us with choices. So the prophet Isaiah offers a way to hammer swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. So that's from chapter 2. It is part of a sequence, as I see it. First, we seek instruction. We go streaming to the mountain for instruction, the house of the Lord. And then we do this very incarnational thing. We hammer swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. And then the final line, which a lot of people leave out, is that we walk in the light of the Lord. So that's, to me, sort of a really healing sequence. There is clear church teaching on conscience. And so I'm not going to read all of that to you, but I can say that I was, one, really glad when Dan and Linda and others in pre-Cana taught about the primacy of conscience in church teaching. And then I was really glad to look it up and read the specifics about that. But basically, that for me is for anyone, not just Catholics or Christians, but whatever God has written on our heart, to practice having a conversation and knowing what it is on our heart that really reflects the love of God for us and the love we have for each other. So that conscience, I can tell you where to find more about that. Catholic Catechism, Chapter 1. Read it up, it's great reading. So I'm grateful for my church's teaching on the primacy of conscience. My going to the U.S. Naval Base at Kings Bay to symbolically disarm the Trident is an act of nonviolent. In an act of nonviolent symbolic disarmament was an act of conscience that reflects my sincerely held religious beliefs, informed by my reading of the Bible, by church teaching, by the signs of the times, the assistance of competent people, and the Holy Spirit. So basically those are some of the elements that the church teaching tells us are part of discernment. The word religion, I am told, means to re-ligament or realign. The way I translate that for myself is to be in right relationship. Because we human beings can be blind, deaf, and dumb to the fracture of our relationship with God and neighbor. The Bible offers us story after story of where we are likely to fall out of right relationship with God, where we are likely to lose our alignment. Each story is for me a cautionary tale where we might use greater care in maintaining right relationship and restoring right relationship, and with God and with our neighbor, and with the least in particular. So I'm not going to read it, but I have listed here many Bible passages where I see Jesus healing acts, but not just individual, but communal, and then his acts of stepping over a line to prevent harm, and doing that not just for an individual, but for the collective well-being. That our consciousness changes with each one of these gestures, and that certainly his life is threatened with each time that he does that. I'm going to end here. Thanks for your patience. With just 2 paragraphs, so I'm leaving out a ton of stuff for the time here. But fundamental to my religious beliefs is the way in which Jesus' teaching is an action, not just spoken words. Jesus demonstrates right relationship with God and with neighbor in action, and by non-cooperating with, by withdrawing consent from systems that harm life. My choice to enter Kings Bay Naval Base, home of the Trident, after the lock was clipped, is a step I took toward withdrawing my consent from the Trident weapon system, which I really can't emphasize enough that my choice wasn't just about that particular weapon, but the system that weapon enforces. And that system embodies the triplets that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King talks about for me, of white supremacy, greed, and militarization. So hammering dents in the monuments to the missile is another step I took to withdraw my consent. Carefully pouring blood on the ground at the entrance to Swiftland, where the Trident administrators work, is an act of truth-telling, while also withdrawing my consent. Our action manifests that which we are seeking as we are called by the Bible and the prophet Isaiah. A new relationship with these weapons is what we're stepping into with these actions. And putting into right relationship our relationship with God and with neighbor. Our nonviolent symbolic act of disarmament seeks to withdraw consent from the Trident weapon system and the systems of theft and domination that the Trident enforces. So, our action itself reveals the willingness of each of us actors to put our trust in God, not in the idolatrous weapons, but to offer our lives to be transformed, not by force, but by seeking to trust in the will of God. The invitation by Jesus to love one another as I have loved you is an invitation to a disarmed life. This kind of love does not force itself, it does not bear arms, does not threaten harm. It is with this spirit that we went to Kings Bay, the spirit of vulnerability and peace. So thank you for listening, but now I just want to open it up. We have maybe 7 minutes or 10 minutes before moving on to the next Mass and going home to answer questions or even just reflections or thoughts that you have. You don't have to have a question. Fran?
Well, I wonder just specifically what the court's reaction was. Did they sit quietly while you read this?
So this document that
It was a hearing,
this
I
is
guess.
actually, I put 16 pages together. It was kind of long. And each of the 7 of us submitted an affidavit. The court was intrigued and said, I'd like to know more. And so we went for hearings in November 7th and November 19th, where each of us got to testify from the stand, and we had a Catholic theologian, Professor Janine Hill Fletcher from Fordham University, take the stand for about an hour and a half, and she was just powerful.
Electrifying.
There aren't too many places where I've been lately where I've seen like Catholic revival. It was people who were committed atheists and so on were saying, "Oh, this Catholic, maybe now I want." And so she was describing, and that's not a slight about any other religion, but just people who might have been Catholic but didn't resonate with how Catholic was being practiced right now.
Right.
And so they were, she was giving us church teaching that might be hard to find, or maybe not as vibrant at times. But it was pure church teaching, and it was beautiful from the stand. So the judge at one point asked the question, can you tell me the difference between sacramental and prophetic? So just for a U.S. Federal court judge to be asking those kind of questions was kind of interesting. Yes.
So I just have one more question.
Yeah.
Do you think that the court's, let's say, positive reaction was because of the years and years and years of work that you have done, and the strong reputation you have for seeking the truth and standing for your values? I mean, that must be known by the
So we
folks
could
down
probably
there.
speculate for days and years about what the court was thinking, the judge. He's a young fellow, Judge Benjamin Cheesebro is his name, the fellow who we've been speaking with now. I don't know, Fran, what he's moved by. I can say that each one of us did speak. I don't think anyone was contending that we have deeply held religious beliefs. Every single one of us there has lived a life of being Catholic and lives in Catholic work or many, anyway, so I don't think that was in dispute. It is very tricky though, these weapons, as you probably know, and in my lifetime I've watched many friends and family, myself, go to court to raise the issue that these weapons are illegal and immoral, right? And so we've seen court after court after court protect these weapons. So one of the statements from my co-defendant, Mark Colville, was if nuclear weapons are above the law, then what purpose does this court serve? And it really comes down to that, and that's kind of symbolic. There's a lot of things, because that weapon is symbolic of a system. And it's all by force, it's not consensual, that system. And it's global. And in fact, it goes into the heavens. They're doing weaponizing space, right? I mean, it has implications that reach far. So when he said that, anyway, so it's a relationship here, and it's biblical, right? The courts are, so I'm not taking it personally, but the courts are doing a certain job to protect certain systems. And I believe in the process leading up to this action, one of my favorite parts was reading the Bible together, the daily readings together. Before we did anything we did our silent prayer first, but then we would do the readings for the day. And doing it together, and then having sort of Lectio Divina style with things moving us and coming up, that was informing us about how, this is not a new story. This is a very old story, and it repeats itself. And so, is there a resurrection? Yes. So, love and not fear, because Jesus has been through this already. He's already got this one. And this is how it will go, and this is the map. And this is where you will be brought in front of synagogues, and you will be asked to testify, and you might be sentenced to death. All kinds of things. I mean, those aren't just random things that are put in that story for me. So that was a long answer to your question or thought.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fran. Yeah, but I saw another hand over here, and then, yes.
Claire, thank you so much for your efforts here. I guess I'm really interested in who has the levers of power, and I'm really impressed by that you were able to contact this judge and engage them in a really great way. Who, of all the political leaders around in the country, who do you think is most movable here, or is on our side?
Tell me your name.
Carl Frank.
Thank you. I know you best site, but Carl, I actually don't know. But I trust that the collective effort is what God has in mind. So I want to say maybe that's your work, to identify who might be the most powerful. But I feel my calling to be recognizing this need to manifest it, and then sort of like in the great 12-step tradition, attraction rather than promotion. And I'm totally not interested in any system that enforces its will. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And yeah, thank you.
In the article that I read, they said that the court was more disposed to you because it was on a biblical basis and the court was in the south. And it considered that if the court was in the north, you would not be given the ear of the judge as well as you do in the south.
I wonder who wrote that. That's so interesting. So, did you write that? Oh.
No, I did not.
No, but I thought that was interesting. I
It
don't know
is
whether you
interesting.
planned to do that in a southern sphere so that it was more that the judge
We
was
were not that
willing to-
calculated. No, not at all. And so I see other hands, but I can say that it's a situation with possibilities because of that, and that being in jail in South Georgia was like amazing for me. It was very harsh, but I could do Bible with anyone 1, 2, 3, and 4 times a day. I could be part of and call a Bible session, and even quiet prayer one time, silent prayer. But so I don't know about the judge and that, and I.
Well, that was an interesting thought because I never thought of the difference between
Yes.
the north and the south courts
Yes.
and how your
Yes.
biblical defense would be considered. And the other thing I wanted to know is, what was the experience for you when you were in that group and you actually did that? How were you treated when the actual arrest and that event, which keeps so many people, fearful of doing something like that?
Okay, so say your name. Brooke, thank you, Brooke McDowell. We have other questions coming, but how were we treated? We certainly all prepared, especially those who went into the place where the missiles were, the missile silos.
Nuclear.
We each had to get our affairs in order and prepared to possibly be killed. And I can say that I wasn't seeking that. I wasn't wanting that. I wanted nothing more than to come home to my children. Having said that, the people who went to that deadly force zone where the missiles are, they were treated roughly, but as I have said over and over again, security guards can tell, and all of us human beings can tell, maybe because of that thing on our heart, what looks like, it's been on the public record when they say, the security guard will say, looks like protesters, oh, it's those nuns again, or, like you can tell at a glance if that's your business, like this is not one of, we're not coming in this.
You're not Mission Impossible.
We're not, James Bond and so on and so forth. But still, those guys, as you can imagine, were pretty rattled, and so they had the big guns and so on, but no one was hurt. We were held in this position with our hands behind our back, without our warm clothes for many, 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 many hours. That night, Liz, who's very much older than I am, was in a stressful position. But the guard, the officer that arrested those of us at called it the shrine, this missile monument, he was the kindest man I've ever met in my years of being arrested, and we just wanted to honor him and thank him. And he set the tone for the younger people there that were doing arrests. And now I lost his name, but I had his name, and I'll never forget his kindness. Yeah. Anyway, more of that, but.
Thank you for your witness. You're amazing saints in our midst. The thing that really bothers me the most about this is I love that we come at this from a biblical departure. But the thing I want to bring up is to follow the money. Because that's what this is all about, is the money. And who gets it, and which state gets it. And that's the thing, I think. And the people who make these weapons. This is employment. And so this is a big part of this whole thing. It's all of the economy of weapons is I think the driving force behind all of this. So that's the thing I don't want us to overlook, is where is the money coming from? Who's getting it?
Right.
And I mean, we just did this, and they just got a contract a week ago, right?
Yeah. So
For the
Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed
Martin is the biggest weapons manufacturer in the world, and that's our biggest export, and that is
And those are
how
jobs in
children are
downstate
getting.
New York, and that means something. Yeah, this is a business.
So Marianne is so good. Thank you so much, Father Joe, because that is exactly it.
I paid him a lot of money.
That's a place where we have choices of withdrawing our consent as well. And so all of these systems do, it's like that's one of the triplets.
Yeah.
And the triplets always work together, by the way, in my mind. Never one without the other.
Okay, so just to tag, I didn't mean to interrupt what was being said, but Father Joe, thank you for tagging employment. So as Ellen and I joined Clare and the 7 defendants, and by the way, you can hear or read all of their deeply held beliefs, their affidavits are all on the legal update page of Kings Bay Plowshares number 7. So it's on the page, but you can read each one of them, and they are so powerful. We will be also including Professor Janine Hill-Fletcher from Fordham University, her testimony, her questions and answers will all be there, so you could further your information. But sitting there and hearing the commander of the base describe how 10,000 people are employed at Kings Bay is shocking to me. 10,000? 10,000 people, and they are in charge of 17,000 acres of land. And he has a whole ecology department. He has to take care of the dolphins and the forest. And it's like, oh my God, the irony of it all is so drastic. So the thing that I'd like to invite people to look at, and I'm sorry, I thought I had the papers here, but there's 2 things. One is, how many of you have heard of the Nobel Prize winning organization ICANN? Okay, ICANN stands for the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. So ICANN has been wonderful. That's why they won the Nobel Prize last July. They are making an effort, and so far 122 countries have signed on to this effort, this treaty. The treaty is called the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And so these countries, 122 countries, have gone home and they're ratifying this. So I'm not sure of the number. I think it's about 55 nations that have ratified it so far. And there's about 6 big nations, firstly us, that have not done so far. So, as everybody would agree, things only happen from the bottom up. So our effort that we can do locally here in Ithaca, which connects to the big picture to challenge the systemic, as Clare has said, so if I hold a gun to your head, am I using it? Well, this is what we do with the Trident. We hold this cocked gun to the planet. So in order to pull the plug on that cocked gun, and to all nuclear weapons, we can participate in a divestment campaign, and we can go to our local community councils, city councils, town councils, and this is a resolution, or a divestment resolution that has teeth, and it actually can work. So we get our city council to agree to withdraw our municipal workers' pension funds at the state level, but we have to do this community by community by community, to go to Tom DiNapoli from New York State, and every other state can do this too. We collectively, all the city councils of New York State can go to Tom DiNapoli and we say, we want our pension funds out of this death dealing, and we know our whole country's economy is 60% of our economy is based on the sale of weapons, nuclear weapons. And so it will be really difficult in certain communities like Syracuse, where Lockheed Martin employs lots of people, and there may be pushback on the city council level. But we can do this collectively. We can talk to our neighbors. And I think it's really important for us to think about, well, what are the alternatives? What can we do as community members to create alternative jobs to this militarist stuff? This is going to be the hardest work, is how do we find and how do we present alternative economic ways of survival? I mean, they're all there. And we, as a community, can think this through. So, do you have any questions?
Well,
Chuck?
Could I just say, what's important to know who's in the neighborhood doing something? That's
Yes,
what I
I'm
was hoping
sorry.
to
Yes,
ask
thank you.
to
So
say.
there's, all right, so Code Pink on a national level has, if you go to the Code Pink page, and then the Divest from War campaign is what's happening national. But locally, Dr. Frank Baldwin and his wife Blythe, and also, tell me, Teresa's, Wales Brown from Amnesty International, and others have been working on the ICANN treaty, and also we will be working together on this divestment thing.
So maybe you could be a point person.
I could be a
if people
point
want
person if you want to
speak,
work.
to plug in locally with efforts that
Yes.
are happening already.
Yes, what I understand is that Dr. Baldwin and his wife Blythe, who are part of the Episcopal Peace Fellowship, have already presented the resolution to our city council to support the ICANN efforts, the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. But that's not the only thing. We've got to work these two pieces together, and so we can do a second effort at the city council level. So,
Okay.
I was going to say that locally, the
oh, you're one of them.
city of Ithaca on October 2nd passed the Back from the Brink Nuclear Disarmament Resolution,
Yes.
which has been signed by lots of other cities and many countries, and it's UN sponsored. Unfortunately, none of the 9 nuclear weapon possessing nations
That's it,
have
9.
signed on to it, including the United States and Russia, that have 95% of the nuclear weapons.
Say your name
Yes,
again.
would you say your name and just so that people connect you with that effort locally?
My name is Dennis Osika. I live in Lansing.
And you're part of
I'm
St.
on
Catherine?
the Cornell University Nuclear Disarmament Committee.
Awesome, awesome. So people can see you. And it occurs to me that there's many people sitting in this room that might want to just identify themselves and the work that they're doing, because this is a collective effort with many, many sides. And,
Yeah. Chuck.
So I have two things
Your
to
name?
say. Chuck Geisler.
Who's been on town council? Which council were you on?
None.
None? Sorry.
Thank you. So, 2 points. One is that I think a lot of us are aware that Norfolk Naval Base, which is also a whopper,
Yep.
it may compete in size with the base in Georgia, is pretty much being swamped out by rising sea level.
That's right.
And
Exactly.
it makes me wonder if the Georgia base, the Kings Bay base, is, because it's all seagrass and mangroves.
Yeah.
That's
I've been
right.
there.
Yes.
And it is probably facing the same problem, which raises the prospect that it's going to have to be relocated, either inland or someplace else. And I think that will perhaps create an opportunity for discussion about its substance,
Ah.
the kinds of things we're talking about.
Yes,
That's,
Chuck, you are
that's point
so.
one. And point two, Claire, could you help me understand where we are in the defense?
Yes.
Is it closed or is there
Sorry.
still part
So,
of it?
thank you, I'm remiss in not giving that perspective. Because we were asked to give more testimony in this pretrial period regarding RFRA, there's still, we're in a pretrial stage still. The judge magistrate Cheesebro is going to give us his decision in another week or two, I understand.
Oh, that's not what I understand. I understand the process is that you guys had 15 days to write some more, and then
Yeah.
the prosecution was gonna respond, and then Cheesebro was
And then
gonna
Cheesebro is gonna make
So
it.
it'll take us out till like January.
He makes a recommendation to our trial judge. So what Marion just said is absolutely more accurate. And so that's like a month down the line before he gives us his recommendation. And so now we're looking at possibly trial in February. So that's good to know. And we're inviting anyone to come to
Yes.
Brunswick, Georgia, to the federal court.
It's warm down there.
And it's warmer than it is here. But really, and our father always said, being in a courtroom is one of the best educations you'll ever get. You will see like what happens in that system, and you will get to practice nonviolence in that system.
Oh, boy.
It's very challenging because you're not treated well. But that. So yes, please come. And many of us have had conversions of heart in those places, and eyes open and following the money, and also to see what is left, what is kept out in the presence of a jury. All that might. Yes, Linda.
So Claire, I know, and maybe everybody else knows, but
Yeah.
in case they don't, the situation you're in now is presenting this defense based on your faith. And this person who's been hearing it is going to determine whether you can do that in the actual court, no?
So we've been pre-trial presenting this argument to ask we're actually in the stage where we're asking to dismiss the charges based on this.
I see,
So,
okay.
but once this judge magistrate Cheesebro makes his decision, it then becomes a recommendation for the trial judge,
Okay.
who's a woman named Judge Wood. So I'm sorry if that's complicated, but
It is complicated.
I'm learning, and as you can see, I'm not even paying that close attention. Tell me when I need to go back there. So 5 of us are out in this pretrial stage. Mark might go back in soon, but we're all out on ankle bracelets. I just realized I could show you our
Look at that stretch.
device that is an electromagnetic frequency that is being used more and more. I actually feel the obligation to talk about that because huge part of this journey is understanding what it is, as Pope Francis says, solidarity. What do people on the wrong side of this system experience in a daily human way, right? And so ankle bracelets probably appear to be the more humane way to deal with the problem of crime, which I have a lot to say about what is real crime, and I don't call people criminals unless they're killing millions and stealing trillions. But in any case, these bracelets are used for thousands and thousands of people in millions in this country, and electromagnetic frequency is not good for your health. I'm right now dealing with Lyme disease, and my immune system is compromised already, and it's being even more compromised by having to wear this 24/7 and plug in for an hour or two a day to recharge it. So that's a little tiny thing about what pretrial looks like, in addition to waiting for the judge to decide this, or going back and forth to Georgia to argue more on the motions. Michael?
Who are some of the lawyers that you have helping to defend you other than yourselves?
Good question.
And Joe was absolutely correct. And you've already got all kinds of strikes against you with the criminal justice system itself. Plus, the fact that, as Joe said, and it's the key, follow the money.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
that's where it's at.
So-
That's what eventually will get some other popular people that are now might be on trial, hopefully. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real crime and real criminals
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
making an appearance.
Exactly.
Well, so your original
because
question
the
was,
biblical
yeah.
stuff is fine, but I think the important thing is following the money and maybe getting some lawyers that'll do something pro bono for you. I mean, some
So,
good lawyers in
to
this
that
country.
to that question, we definitely have lawyers that are pro bono.
Okay.
Now they have about 8 lawyers that are working.
You
with
should
them.
see our
You should
lawyers.
see
I
the
wish I
table.
had a paper cutout for each one and they'd stand up
They're
here.
really wonderful.
Bill Quigley is one of the main lawyers, and he's been he's the director of the Southern Poverty Law Center.
No, he's
He runs the Loyola Law Clinic at Loyola University.
This
and
is
he's
why
amazing.
we work as a team, because everything that I say has to be questioned. Oh God, Phil. Anyway, he's a wonderful guy, and
He is.
he's really experienced in these things. And yes, about the money, and you know, you can't emphasize that enough. And yet, I don't think I want to be discouraged about waiting for someone else to do what God might be calling them. I'm going to trust that when I do what God is calling me, that these other pieces, space will open up for a bigger conversation, consciousness moves and raises. So, Peter, thank you. So good.
Just a comment on Mary Ann's, the divestment point, okay? For us in this room, there's already a precedent in the anti-fracking movement.
That's right.
That in many ways, before it ever got anywhere at the state level, okay, emerged as a result of municipal,
pension funds.
well, no, it was a result
Activity.
of
Oh, yes.
resolutions drafted at the local, town, and municipal levels. And as this movement became perceived as more and more threatening, okay, you know, and then it galvanized. Okay,
Yes.
so the point is that we cannot wait for officialdom on any level.
Exactly.
That, you know, basically, it's a grassroots issue. The other point that was, I almost wish he was still here. Father Joe happened to have this, maybe it had to do with the Trinity,
Yeah.
but he had a triangle. And I just wanted to piggyback on his follow the money point and Mike's, just to say something about the how. When we were dealing with trying to end the arms race in the early 80s, when Reagan was calling the Soviet Union the evil empire, there was a chart basically that we used to teach about addressing the arms race. And it basically had what was called the iron triangle. And so that iron triangle has not changed. So following the money basically has to do with who is lobbying the Congress. Okay, so one part of the triangle has to do with corporations, multinational corporations. Okay, the other part has to do with those who claim to represent us in the Congress. And the other part basically has to do with who gets the contracts, the other part of the triangle, the Pentagon.
Yes.
Okay? And the interesting thing is that the arrows are dynamic in that triangle. People are constantly shifting in and out. You vote somebody out of one of those places, they go back into the corporation. You vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so following the money is a long-term project. Okay? It's a long-haul project alongside prophetic witness and divestment, and any of us who happen to have shares in any way, shape, or form, you know, can also be involved, as a number of religious communities have been involved in basically going to shareholder meetings and basically declaring that we don't want our funds used for X, Y, or Z purposes, but we want them for life-giving purposes. The last point I wanted to mention has been brought up by one of the most recent congresspersons from New York City, Representative Cortez Ocasio.
Ocasio-Cortez,
Okay,
yeah, Alexander.
what we do need to follow, which is incumbent on us from a social justice perspective, is the development of this. It has another term, somebody else will probably name it, but basically it has to do with economic conversion. It has to do with redeveloping what Roosevelt once called the CCC, or basically green jobs for all.
Exactly.
In other words, how when we're asking why we're denouncing
Yes.
systemically, how at the same time are we announcing life-giving, right livelihoods
Yep.
Yes.
for people, whether we're talking about the Cayuga power plant, okay, that needs to be shut down, or whether we're talking about Kings Bay. All right, what kind of economic conversion are we behind, all right, so that people will have life-giving work? And there's plenty to be had that doesn't have to involve training people to kill. There are many ways to serve the country without training people to kill or to maintain these systems. So there are 15 representatives right now. I'm sure Reed is not among them. And I'm not saying that to be pejorative, okay? Because you can follow the money, okay? And understand why. But basically, she's trying to get a Democratic caucus together. So at this particular point, and as of the last reading I had, there were maybe 15 reps who were behind her on this movement for green jobs and a new kind of economy. Excuse me for
No, that was
going on.
great, Peter.
So
It's affirming.
we need to balance the denouncement with the announcements.
Exactly.
So that we do not drown in depression.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Peter, thank you, thank you. That's exactly it. And I personally, I mean, I hope I come from announcement as well. That I didn't just appear, denounce, but they both energize each other. And that we're having this circle right now for everyone in this room to be who you are, and then see each other. And I hope that people connect when, like what you're just talking about. And it doesn't, for my mind, it doesn't have to just be about nuclear weapons. Whatever you are working on that interrupts that system and replaces it with life-affirming green jobs and so on is in my mind, a step in the better direction.
So like Charlie Bowman is a dear friend of ours from Buffalo. Charlie is an engineer, and when he heard that there was going to be a drone base built in Buffalo, he went to the drawing board and drew up a green park, like a solar power park, to be used at the same property that a drone base would be used. So that's an example of how we can exchange and be life-affirming. Obviously it has to be the will of the people, which I want to give you two very positive notes. On the New York State level, Tom DiNapoli was only lobbied for 2 years, and he succumbed and withdrew the pension funds from all private prisons, which is huge. So it can be done. It's a si se puede moment. And that's why I feel, and the other thing I wanted to say is I listened to Democracy Now! And Patricia Vanderhoevel, who is the editor for The Nation magazine, I think that's her first name. Katrina, thank you. She described how instead of The Nation magazine putting the whole thing about the elections on November 6th edition, she said we put nuclear weapons and the climate disruption as the headlines. And I think there is a groundswell. We're coming back to these issues as being the most life-threatening. And so, anyway.
I just want to ask about platforms for the young, like at colleges or something that's reaching not just the elders of our community, but also the new voters, the people from Cornell, IC, the students that often carry that radical base. I just didn't know whether they could give you a platform to speak or.
Me personally, I have, because I've been sick, I wasn't doing much until recently, and I wanted to start with the churches that I'm part of. And so that's where I am now, but I know that the group that Marion referred to with Blythe and Frank Baldwin, that they're one of the long-term members is a young student at Cornell. She, I think maybe, I'm not sure if she's from New York City, but she lived in Japan during, after Fukushima, and she has committed her life to stopping nuclear power and weapons, Lisette. But that's definitely, Ellen can speak more to that. I just want to note the time
Yes,
is
everybody has to go.
now almost 11:15, and I would like to go to Mass.
Thank you.
So I just want to just say a couple of things. One is Claire is available to talk.
Yep.
And so if you know of places where she could talk, please
Let's set it up.
Please let's set it up. And if you know places at the colleges and stuff, or people that might be teachers, even just a small group of students, that would be great. ICANN, which has the information, their website is on the back of the news sheet. It's also on the LG too, I think. But anyway, they're doing a lot with young people, and I think it's great if you want to touch base with them and see what kind of stuff they're doing. And the last thing that I want to say is the Bulletin for Atomic Scientists, in my lifetime, I mean, this is the closest they set this doomsday clock, and many of you probably know it, but back when the Berlin Wall came down, the clock went all the way back to 15 minutes to midnight. The closest that I know of in the 80s, it was 3 minutes to midnight. And it went all the way back to 15 or 16 minutes to midnight. And now we are at 2.5 minutes to midnight, with taking into account the nuclear weapons policies as well as climate change. They put those two things in. And that's why the nation would put that on the front of their cover. And then the last piece is, there's a website for this, and the information is right here on the back. Please look at it if you want to learn more.
And we also are in big need of money in order to this is the fundraising pitch. We would love it if you could help us out at our GoFundMe site, which is on the website, and
Or a check is
or if you want to write a check.
better than it doesn't go to.
Yeah. That's right. Better checks, and you can you can contact us. We need it to get people down to Georgia, and also to rent a big house so you all can come. And we need press releases. We need help in any way that you can creatively think of. We need to get the word out that this is happening. So, just one last footnote that I heard earlier. I was working on that flyer that Ellen read at the beginning, and I'd like to point out that my understanding is that there are 6 tridents in Georgia of the United States, but there's 4 more of the Brits that they rent space. So there's actually 10 trident submarines in Georgia. And then
in and out of
port. They're coming in and out. That's their staging place. And the commander admitted that when they are sitting in port, they are most vulnerable. So we have 10 in Georgia and 10 in Bangor, Washington, right next door to Seattle.
And there's a contract with a lot of money to build 13 more in Electric Boat in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And
So there's the job.
Whole new class.
So this it's sucking, if you are working on a grassroots level with announcement, like the money's going like this, just like
Over
gone.
$100 billion
after-
to build
1.2
this whole new class of.
And the cost of the program is $1.2 trillion for Trident. And now they want to upgrade it. It's insane.
I did bring BBs to show, like one BB being one Hiroshima, and then 2,400, and this is a very old thing, but I got stuck on some of my calculations. But just imagine one BB being the bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then like many, 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 many more of these being poured. Thank you for being here.